Here we go. FT Live on Stadium. Big crew today. Braun, Frazier, Przinski, Kratz, and Ken Rosenthal back at it with us. Ken, first off, just in general, your thoughts on that game four. Were you surprised how much of a blowout it was early on and how much damage the Rangers were able to do against the Arizona bullpen, all with two outs, too?
Of course, I was surprised. No one expected it to be 10-0 after 3 innings, and that's what it was, Scott. So, yeah, I thought it would be a closer game. Basically, I thought it would be like a 9-8 game, which is sort of what it became in the end, 11-7. But it did surprise me to see Arizona's pitching staff just have no ability to hold down the Rangers. And it was impressive to see the Rangers do what they did on the day they lost Adolis Garcia and also Max Scherzer. They came out and played a fantastic game.
I will say, we got to give Ken credit here, AJ. You heard it. Ken said, I expect a high scoring game. How'd that
Well, that's
go?
why that's why we all took the over.
That was helpful. That was helpful. Ken nailed it on that front. Okay, so let's project it forward. Game five, we've got the starters flipping back with Evaldi going up against Zach Gallen. I know these guys have their own questions. The main theme that I keep bringing up is the best hitter, and especially the best clutch hitter right now in the sport. I guess you could make a case for Yordan Alvarez, but besides him, Corey Seager. I mean, the dude is incredible in October. He's done this in a prior World Series as well. Why are they pitching to him? Why are they throwing pitches over the zone to also a guy who will swing out of the zone? And even if he does do that and make contact, your quality of contact is probably not going to be as likely to be a home run.
Scott, this is baffling to me as well. I wrote about it. I don't remember which game, but it was one of the games in which he crushed a first pitch fastball. And it was actually game one when Seawald gave up the home run, the game tying home run. I said, why are they throwing him first pitch fastballs? And I know Seawald has a fastball and one other pitch, and that's it. I get it. But why go in the zone? And that's my question. I would try to get the chase, even if it means falling behind 1-0. And I know, obviously, pitchers aren't perfect. They'll miss while trying to go maybe up and away or whatever. But it's baffling to me that that's the position that pitchers put themselves in because he does so often swing at the first pitch. I ran some numbers. He has the most or the highest rate of first pitch swings since coming into the league, something like that. And that's how he rolls. It seems to be working for him. If I were a pitcher, I wouldn't be going anywhere near the zone.
I talked about earlier in the playoffs. I said one of the bigger keys is going to be the bottom of the lineup on all these teams. You know, everybody has their one to three starting pitchers that are really good. They have their top guys that can hit, but the bottom of the lineup's going to have to come through. When I think of Texas, I think of Josh Young. I think of Evan Carter, who was down there. Now he's up. Now you got a guy like Travis Jankowski who's got to step up for Garcia, you know, being hurt. So for him coming up big there yesterday was unbelievable. Talk to us about that bottom of the lineup and, you know, how surprising it's been.
Well, they have a very deep lineup 1 to 9, especially when Garcia is healthy. It's one of their trademarks, their hallmarks. They are very deep offensively. They can do a lot of different things with a lot of different players. Leody Taveras is the guy who bats ninth for the most part, and he is an interesting offensive player. He can do some things. He's drawn some big walks in this series. He can hit the ball out of the park, and he's hitting ninth. So Jankowski yesterday, obviously replacing Garcia, he's not going to be able to do that. He's got 10 home runs in his career and about 1,500 at bats. Garcia had 8 home runs in the postseason before getting hurt. But Jankowski is the kind of player that I know you guys like. He can do a lot of different things. Offensively, defensively, base running. He is a dynamic guy who can really help a team win in any number of ways. And yesterday you saw his first 2 at bats, 2 out hits, and 1 drove in 2 runs. So good for him. He's had a long journey. He's been kind of a journeyman in his career, but he has been well liked and respected wherever he's been, and that's the case in Texas as well. And that speaks to their whole team. They have this next man up mentality that I said this on the air last night. I know it can be a cliche, but with them it's a reality. And that's the way they've been all year long. Remember, they lost DeGrom. They lost Seager twice. They lost Heim and Young and a number of players all season, one after another, different injuries taking place. and yet they always seem to have answers, and that's why they're one win away from being World Series champions.
Let's talk about smart money. All right. Let's talk about the fact that they signed Seager and Simeon maybe a year too early before they actually thought they could win these games. They're quiet. You wrote in an awesome article about talking about how they impact things. Obviously, you wrote out their numbers and you said how they're quiet leaders, how there's so many, they lead by example on and off the field. Who are the leaders in that clubhouse? Because so many teams want to talk about that. That's the first thing the high money teams talk about. Mets didn't make it. Oh, there must be something wrong in the clubhouse. Padres didn't make it. Something wrong in the clubhouse. Do they have leaders that are the vocal leaders if these two guys are the quiet ones?
I don't know that they have a vocal leader. They have these two guys who are stoic and lead by example types. Now, obviously, they can pull a player aside, and I'm sure they both do that from time to time, but they are definitely in the lead by example category. Garcia is not necessarily a leader, Eric, but he is like a glue guy in that room. He gets along with everyone. He has and brings a lot of positive energy that the players all talk about. He is beloved in that clubhouse. And then you have other guys like Garver and Heim who are just solid professional players, and there's leadership in that as well. So I don't know that they have the guy. They've got a manager who's a great leader in his own right with his calm demeanor and the way he just handles a game and sees everything and just keeps things under control. So it's not necessarily one guy the way I see it, but those two guys, the most interesting quote I thought in the article was from Travis Jankowski, who said, "They make our rookies better. I wish when I was a young player, I had that kind of example to follow. It's like, watch us, watch the drive that we bring every day, watch how we go about our business." And that's the way Marcus Semien and Corey Seager are. Marcus Semien never misses a game, right? He has missed, I think, 4 games the last 5 years, something like that, not counting the shortened season. And Corey Seager, not as durable, obviously, but he is a guy who, when he is healthy, certainly plays every day. You saw last night, he looked uncomfortable on the home run swing. I don't know what it was, but he stayed in the game. And he's just a guy that, in these moments, seems to shine. Now, I know some of his postseasons with the Dodgers weren't as good as this one. I get it. Nobody's great every single year in the postseason. So Dodger fans need to cool it a little bit with that, but my goodness, he was amazing in the 2020 playoffs, NLCS MVP, World Series MVP. He's been amazing in these playoffs as well.
Yeah, but Ken, that was in a bubble. 2020 was in a bubble. It doesn't count, right? That's what people say.
Yeah, right. Some could argue, AJ, that was even a more difficult circumstance. I know it was the shortened season, and the Dodgers will never get past that until they win one in a full season, but there were challenges that season that obviously were unique in the game's history.
Okay, so Ken, I know we're talking heavy Rangers because they're 1-win away, but how do the Diamondbacks get back into this series? Besides Zach Gallen going out and throwing a gem, what else do the Diamondbacks need to happen in order to make this go back to Texas and maybe get it to a 6 and a 7?
AJ, they're an interesting team, right? We saw them fall behind the Phillies 2-0 and 3-2 going back to Philly. Last night they're down 10-0. They make it 11-7. They have this quality about them where they don't seem to certainly quit or die or whatever word you want to use, which is good. Gallen, it starts with him, obviously. It always starts with the starting pitcher. The one thing I've noticed watching this team play, and I hadn't done it in person much until this World Series, they lack that middle of the order thumper, the guy that you're really afraid of. The middle of the order for them it's Walker, it's Pham, it's that kind of player, which is a good player. Christian Walker and Tommy Pham are really good players, but they're not exactly what you want in that spot. They're not Corey Seager. So they've got to get back into it with starting pitching, number one. And they have to produce some timely hits. And last night, late innings, they kind of got going. So I don't rule them out. I don't rule out this going back to Texas. And if you get it back to Texas, it's the same logic that applied when they went back to Philly. See what happens.
So do you wear a different suit tonight with the chance that there could be some champagne on it, or do you have a rain jacket that you're going to put on?
There's no rain jacket, Eric, and this is an issue. Certainly, when you go into a post-game clubhouse after a playoff victory, any playoff victory, really, you risk the possibility of getting champagne on your suit. Champagne's not that big a deal. It can be dry cleaned. Gatorade, colored Gatorade, is a bigger deal. And then years ago, the Nationals had a chocolate celebration. And I actually have a photograph of myself interviewing Bryce Harper. Max Scherzer pouring chocolate on Bryce's head, and that chocolate got on my suit, and that ruined the suit. So I'm not so worried about tonight, but yeah, there's going to be some action if it happens.
Right, if it happens. Do you think that from the bullpens, teams will look in the offseason at what Texas had and say, hey, maybe their bullpen was not great during the regular season, but they got into the playoffs. And because they have starters that they were able to utilize in those spots, it helped obviously pick up the pace. And here's the key that we were talking about in the last segment. You're looking at those guys for a few innings versus an inning of the Arizona Diamondbacks relievers that we saw yesterday that they've already seen a couple times in the series that they'll probably see again. I mean, the main point I brought up, who's a colleague of yours, is Cyrus mentioned some research that it is actually more of a disadvantage if you're in a long series in the playoffs and your relievers continue to get looked at versus the third time through for a starter. So I took that a step further as, hey, if I've got more starters that are like back end starters, but they've got stuff, or even a number 3 starter who's just coming back from an injury like John Gray, I throw him in there for a few innings. They're only getting one look at him then maybe again in game 7. Just feel like it's not the same script over and over again if you're in control. Do you know what I'm saying?
It's a good point, Scott, and Eno makes a great point as well. I hadn't considered that the third time through is less of a risk than seeing these relievers over and over again. It makes sense if you think about it. The Rangers are a little bit unique in that they loaded up on starting pitching. Remember, they signed DeGrom for starters. They also signed Heaney and Nathan Eovaldi. Then when DeGrom got hurt, they traded for Jordan Montgomery and Scherzer. They are in a good position. They already had John Gray. So when it came to this situation, even without DeGrom, once Eovaldi got healthy, they had a surplus. And they could put Heaney in the bullpen. They could put Dunning in the bullpen. And ultimately, they could put John Gray in the bullpen as well. And Heaney summed it up really well when I spoke to him about this earlier. I asked him, hey, is this bothering you? You signed a 2-year, $25 million contract to be a starter, and you're a reliever. He became a reliever in September after Eovaldi returned from the IL. And he said, listen, this is the way the game works. During the season, the regular season, a team needs 8 to 10 starting pitchers. During the postseason, that number could reduce to 3, maybe 4. So what do? You stick some of those starters in the bullpen and you make it work that way. Not all teams have that depth. We saw Ryan Nelson last night for the Diamondbacks. Turns out they had some depth that they didn't really necessarily think was going to be as good as the relievers that they had in a closer game. But Ryan Nelson pitched really well over a length of time. So if you have that depth, it's the way to go, no question. Put some starters out there. It's just hard to find teams that have that kind of group.
And starters are expensive, right? I mean,
Yes.
It's much cheaper to have a reliever. And, we see some teams like the Rays who do a great job in the regular season of bringing relievers out of nowhere into a prominent role, which is great. I look at Chris Young leading the Rangers right now, and I wonder if he's going to start a trend for people in that spot. I mean, Craig Breslow is a former pitcher in the bigs. Are we going to get like this wave again of players that kind of hop into front office and lead the charge? Obviously, you have to be able to communicate with many different types of people these days, more than ever, probably, to speak different languages of, players, coaches, analytics office, R&D, whatever you want to call it, right? I'm wondering if people are going to be looking for a Chris Young out there in his style.
The Red Sox just did. You mentioned it, Scott. They hired Breslow. And Breslow, of course, is a former Major League pitcher like Chris Young. So obviously it's a copycat game. We know that. And I would expect that teams will look for pitching expertise, as probably they always have. The greater question for me is how do you bring back the starting pitcher? And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. The commissioner has addressed it. The obvious way is to reduce the size of a staff. That way you need more innings out of your starters because you don't have as many pitchers to go to. This needs to happen. And last night was, by today's standards, not an unusual game. but really by the breadth of history, when you look at the game over the decades, it's a very unusual game. And it's not a healthy thing for the sport. Just kept running out relievers, and cycle through that way. And really, both teams were kind of in that position. Obviously, the Rangers got more length out of Heaney, but Tyler Kepner wrote a really good article today in The Athletic, essentially saying this is not what a World Series game should be about. I would like to see the game get back to the point where starting pitching is valued again. And yes, it is more expensive. But you know what? You'd rather buy a ticket to see a good starting pitching matchup than a bullpen game. So maybe you get the money back that way.
Ken, speaking of the bullpen, were you were at the game last night? Do you have a full makeup crew before the game? Because I'm just wondering.
AJ.
There's a picture of A-Rod, and I thought that maybe before A-Rod gets his team, that you're in that chair before your one camera hit the first pitch. Could this have been you before?
No. I do my own makeup, and yes, I do apply it. And guess what? I'll give you a little secret, AJ. I apply it underneath the stands, so nobody can see me. So nobody can put it on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. So then, if nobody can put it on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, AJ Przinsky can't throw the picture up on foul territory and make fun of me. That's the high motivation.
Wow, that's actually brilliant, Ken, because
Yeah.
you know how many times that I've been at ballparks and I have to like go into the bathroom and there's just a ton of people like, "What are you doing, dude?" And I'm like, "Hi, I'm going on TV. Sorry about it." So they're like, what are you putting on your face?"
I have one funny story about this, guys. This is a funny story. I'll leave with this. So the makeup case, it looks like, or not unlike, a can of tobacco, spitting tobacco, or chewing tobacco. And one year I have it in my back pocket, and I'm walking around batting practice or whatever, and Brian Cashman says to me, "Hey, you're chewing tobacco?" Because he's looking in my pocket and sees the case, which is roughly similar to the chewing tobacco case. I said, "This is the furthest thing from chewing tobacco you're going to find in baseball." And I pulled it out, and there was my makeup, and that was that.
Oh, that's good. That's good. You're right. Right. It's like a little circular. I have it over there. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
with you. Little cup. So, well, I like
War
that. You
paint.
should have been
Ken,
like, "Yeah,
it's war
Cash, I'm
paint."
trying to war paint." Right. Call it war paint. Well, yeah, you know, he doesn't have 5 people working on his makeup. So, Ken, a man of the people. Ken, have fun. Good luck to you and your suit if the Rangers win. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you. Ken Rosenthal, you can catch him on Fox tonight for Game 5 and, of course, on Fair Territory. You can look at all the topics that were covered this week. Really good stuff on Merrill Kelly, for example, some insight there. And if you're looking at the offseason already, Juan Soto talk is in there too.